I just watched a video that depicts a certain mindset on prophecy, and it's basically gets the understanding of prophecy wrong, and also the geopolitics wrong, and doesn't view things through a historical lens. For example, the idea of Christian Zionism is something that was planted in the churches going way back, and encouraged because the Rothschilds wanted a colony in the Middle East, and the British Empire was still playing the great game with Russia, because I think it was in 1856 they just fought the Crimean War. Yep, that's right, exactly the same place where they're fighting now, Crimea, Ukraine. Same. History well. They say it doesn't. It doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme, and it is rhyming because these same regions are being fought about. And the Ukraine oblast was a part of Russia at the time, and there were a lot of Jews there, and the Jews were still even recently pushing to have Ukraine as a second Jewish homeland. The prime minister of Ukraine is Jewish. So this is not none of this is coincidence. And the fact is that it suited Imperial Britain to have a Jewish colony in Palestine to disrupt, because they'd got rid of the Ottoman Empire in World War One, and during that time period we had the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, didn't we? That was also driven from out Great Britain, um, because it was the old East India Company and Wall Street that funded Schiff and all the others that funded the Bolshevik Revolution. It wasn't spontaneous. So there has been this obsession with Russia, the autocrat of Russia, uh, the autocrat and the dictator of Russia. That goes back to the 1800s. There was an obsession with it. And in fact, there were numerous Christians who wrote about that. Um, in fact, Karl Marx was living in England, in Manchester. He had a handler called Engels, which means English. Do you think that's just all coincidence? This living in the territory of the British Empire and this hatred of Russia, and the fact that there were so many Jewish Zionists. I mean, they had a Jewish prime minister, didn't they? England, Disraeli, at one point. I mean, do you think any of this is coincidence? This built-up hatred towards Russia, where the Jews had basically been controlled, and there'd been pogroms and all sorts of other things. Um, no, this is historical. And in 1848, Marx produced the Communist Manifesto, and I think that's about the same time that let me think. Yeah, John Thomas wrote Elpis Israel, 1848, Communist Manifesto, and a book about the Jews returning to the land. And there was a big push from then onwards. But all the Christian denominations, the Plymouth Brethren, and a lot of other Christian denominations had been penetrated by this theology that the Jews must return to Israel because Britain wanted a colony. There were certain aspects, certain elements in Britain that wanted a Jewish colony in the Middle East. So if you don't put the current events in context, in historical context, you're going to get nowhere. When did Russia ever attack Britain or Europe? It didn't. At least not initially. What happened was Napoleon tried to conquer Russia, and that failed. And Hitler tried to conquer Russia, and that failed. That's when Russia pushed back. and we get the whole Iron Curtain. But even before then, there was the the Russo-Sino war, the Japanese-Russian war, um, and that was funded by the Rothschilds banks again. So we see that there's always been this hatred against Russia, and it's been the West that's been pushing against Russia and wanting Russia to be split up and collapse. So, not that I'm defending Russia. I don't think there's any good guys in this. As a Christian, I don't support any nationalist ideology, neither the West, nor Russia, nor Israel. I look for the kingdom of God. But you cannot understand any of this geopolitics unless you put it in the bigger picture. And part of that bigger picture is that the Jews have always hated Russia, and the countries that they've embedded their Anglo-Zionist theology in, which are countries like Great Britain, and you got there's a good one, Great Britain, British Israelitism. The Brits thought they were the 10 lost tribes. In fact, Prince Charles traces his lineage back to Christ via Mary Magdalene. There's a whole Gnostic theosophist undertone in the in Britain, in the aristocracy, and especially in the intelligence agencies, which are occult. They're all occultists. This whole thread of Kabbalah, Gnosticism, comes from is very ancient and is embedded in Britain from Elizabeth I, the court of Elizabeth I. There was John Dee, who proclaimed that he had visions from, he was the court astrologer, the mathematician, the scientist in Elizabeth I, and he claimed that he had received secret code and language from Enoch. He was a Kabbalist, and Trump is Chabad. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who wants to be a property developer in Gaza, is Chabad. They're all influenced. And if you don't see the bigger picture is that they want to bring in this AI technocratic bio-digital convergence. It's not just about the geopolitics of this war. It's not just about Israel. It's about a bigger plan to bring us all under this new form of governance and control. And that's not fantasy. They're working at it very hard at AI. And Israel is dead center of this new technology. In fact, Microsoft moved its headquarters to Israel. And they've used AI in their campaign against Gaza. Palantir was heavily involved. You don't know anything you're talking about. You really are just scratching the surface. And you don't understand biblical prophecy, nor do you understand the geopolitics. And you're just acting as a propaganda shield for Israel. Oh yes, they bombed all the hospitals and the kindergartens and the universities because Hamas was hiding under all of them. That's a load of rubbish. That's a lie. It's just a plain lie. 30,000 children have died, and you're justifying it. 30,000. It's a big fat lie. I'm sorry. It makes me angry just to hear it, because they actually went into the hospitals on foot and shot patients and shot children in the face. And you're telling me that this was all to stop Hamas? No. You're acting as an Israeli propagandist and a shill. Most of the Israelis killed on October 7 were killed by their own troops. The Apache helicopter gunships that went up shot their own people. They weren't all killed by Hamas. There were some killed by Hamas, but they covered it up. They lie and propagandize everything. All their stories about beheaded babies and babies in the pizza oven and blah, 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 blah. That's all made up. They are propagandists. They are liars and deceivers. And you support them without a question. All their evil deeds you support. Well, I don't. I'm a Christian. I do not support their evil deeds, and God will punish them for their evil deeds. Do you think God approves of this? They've returned to Israel. They've returned to the land in unbelief. God has not commanded them to do this. They've returned in unbelief. The Jews spit on Christians. There are orthodox sects of Judaism, that spit on Christians when they see them in the street. They look down on them as useful idiots. And that's what you are, a useful idiot, if you're supporting the propaganda. And what you said about Australia, that's a lie. I have tons of evidence that these were staged events. A synagogue on fire. Do you know what happened when the police turned up at the synagogue that was burning? The only people they found was a Jew running away with burnt hands. And he said, oh, yeah, I tried to get in and put the fire out. Yeah, sure. And that whole thing of the caravan with the explosives was all a load of rubbish. It's set up. I've got articles on my website. There's plenty of articles out there. Do your own research. You can find out that it was all set up. In fact, ASIO, which is the Australian Intelligence Agency, has warned that there were outside countries trying to do operations in Australia, but it wouldn't name names. Oh, I wonder who those outside countries were. I'll tell you who it was. It was Israel and Mossad. They're running operations, false flag operations in Australia. Oh, you don't know that, do you? Well, let me tell you this. They took Australian passports and used them, Mossad, when they committed assassinations in other countries. Yes. And then the Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister, I think it was Rudd, warned them. And then he got a dressing down from Mark Lieber. Know your place, lickspittle. That's right. Who's in charge here? I'll tell you who's in charge. The left and the right in this country are nothing. They do as they're told. They do as they're told. And so you're just repeating propaganda. You don't really know what's happening. I'll tell you what's happening in Syria. You showed a picture of Assad with his face shut up. Oh, this is how the people of Syria think about Assad. No, they don't. They don't all think of him like that. Do you know, during Assad's reign, people could walk the streets. Women could walk the streets safely without wearing a veil or a hijab. And Christians could walk the street without being harassed. And Muslims could walk the street, both Shia and Shiite Muslims. There was no sectarian violence in Syria when Assad was in charge. Was he brutal to those who wanted to overthrow his government? Oh, yes, he was, because that's the only way you can keep control in these countries, by being completely brutal. Yes, he was. He was brutal to his opponents. But ordinary people could live their lives, believe what they want, walk the street, no fear of being raped, no fear of being kidnapped. Well, that's all gone down now, hasn't it? Because they put a terrorist, a literal terrorist, in charge. And as of yesterday, they were going in houses and beheading and shooting people. That's on the internet. You can find out. Yep, that's what the West has done again. And you say, oh, yeah, well, his regime just collapsed like that. No, it didn't. They had 11 years of the Caesar sanctions, and America grabbed the oil wells and the wheat production in the north of the country. Trump even admitted it. He said, oh, yes, steal the oil, bomb the oil. I've got the clip. Steal the oil, bomb the oil. So they drove Syria into the ground. They supported and weaponized a faction of ISIS. And guess what? ISIS have never attacked Israel. ISIS never attacked Israel. I wonder why. I wonder why these head choppers never, these extremist Muslim head choppers never attacked Israel. Strange that. Strange. You don't know anything. The Muslim Brotherhood. Who set up the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt? Who set that up? Great Britain. That's a vehicle of MI6. All these wars are caused by the West in the Middle East. All these, have they found the weapons of mass destruction? No. Oh, and you go on about Iran. I'll tell you about Iran. In the 1950s, it was a democracy. It was a democracy. People could vote. Women wore modern clothes. They went to school. They got educated. And what happened? Oh, I'll tell you what happened. The West decided they wanted to get rid of the Iranian government, because he wanted to nationalize the oil wells. It was BP, British Petroleum. He wanted to nationalize the oil wells and use that wealth to build up his country. He didn't see why foreign invaders had to take all the wealth out of his country. And what happened? They got rid of him. I seem to remember an incident where 400 people were locked up in a cinema theater and burnt alive. Yeah, that was all the West. That was all the West supporting extremists again. That's what they always do, overthrow governments, like they overthrew the government in Ukraine. So you are lying if you're not telling the full story and the full background of how we got where we are. That means that you are lying or being economical with the truth. Not only that, but you don't know prophecy either. Go and look at some old maps. Look at maps from the geography of Herodotus and have a look and see where the Goma and Magog and all that is. That's in the region of Turkey. Turkey. That's right. Not Russia. Not Russia. You might have to redo some of your thinking, especially the bit about living securely and in peace. You have no idea of prophecy. It's just ridiculous. The great harlot who rode the back of the beast was Israel. It's always been Israel, the harlot. It's always been Israel, drunk with the blood of the prophets, drunk with the blood of Jesus Christ. It was the harlot. The harlot system. She rode the beast. She rode Rome, the 7 hills of Rome. She rode Rome. She got Pilate to crucify Christ. She got Nero, because Nero's mistress was a Jewish convert. She got Nero to put the Christians in the Colosseum in front of the lions. So it was always the Jews controlling Rome. It's not the Catholic Church. It was the Jews, and God kicked them out the land. The last time they were in the land was with the Bar Kokhba rebellion, which was 3.5-year rebellion, 42 months. That's interesting. Where does that number come from? Sounds familiar. 1260 days, 42 months, rebellion. They were kicked out the land. They were never allowed to come back in until the Rothschilds planted their colony there. So the Jews are literally wrestling God. And they're going to bring their own, they're going to build their own kingdom. Oh, and by the way, you want to worship the Jews? Like I said, they were using AI to target civilians in Gaza. Do you know what they called the AI system they were using? They called it the gospel. So they were bringing the Palestinians the gospel. It's just a mockery of God. And their other system, Palantir was heavily involved, was called Welcome Home Daddy, targeting men that were going home to visit their families. It's disgusting. What they've done is disgusting. You don't tell them about the fact that Israeli, you go on about the hostages, but most of the people killed on October 7 were killed by Israeli IDF Apache helicopters. They have a directive called the Hannibal Directive, which says basically, don't let them take any hostages alive. If they take a hostage, kill the hostage. Take their bargaining chip away. That was reported in Haaretz. You don't know what you're talking about. You do not know what you are talking about. It really makes me angry when you push in Israeli propaganda. You do know that Hamas was funded by Netanyahu, funded by Israel, because they wanted to split the PLO, because they didn't want a two-state solution. They wanted to bring trouble between the PLO and Hamas, so they funded Hamas. So it backfired on them. You know, you're just telling one story after another. And you say, oh, yeah, they did all these crimes. They let these hostages loose that are all murderers and rapists. No, they're not. They're picking up ordinary people from the street. At one point, they had 8,000 people in prison without charge if they were murderers. And if they were rapists, then they would have gone before an Israeli court and be charged. No, they were held without charge. Without charge. So they weren't all murderers and rapists. That's just not true again. It's not true again. But yet, the Israeli prison guards, they were raping, sodomizing their prisoners. Did you tell them about that? Did you tell them how they sodomized their prisoners? and how when they were told they would have to face court, the Israeli court, how the settlers protested and made a big stink about it, so they let them off the hook. They let sodomites, brutally sodomized prisoners, off the hook. And there's lots of Palestinian prisoners who are left who've lost arms and legs and limbs and eyes through torture. So don't you tell me about the actual, and then you go on about, well, they say there's a genocide, but then they say they've had a victory in the war. Well, that's just, again, semantics. It's very Jewish of you to use semantics. Yes, they have won, because Israel did not defeat them in the genocide. The Palestinians came back. They would not be pushed off their land. They refused to budge. So that means they won against the genocide. Yes, they did win against the genocide. And the Israelis were not able to fight against Palestinian resistance, even though the resistance had no tanks. They had no heavy armor. They had no big bombs. They manufactured their own bombs from the bombs that the Americans dropped that were unexploded. They took the detonators and the stuff out of that. They used their own skills to make rocket launchers and fought back. And Israel did not defeat them. They blew up, I don't know how many Israeli tanks that went into Gaza, and bulldozers who went in to bulldoze down people's homes. It's disgusting. And it's disgusting that you can justify it. I don't care if you call yourself a Christian, that you can make videos like this where you don't understand prophecy, and you don't. I'm going to put links in about Daniel's prophecy, King of the North, King of the South. You haven't got a clue what you're talking about. You really haven't. And I could go on, but I'm just so tired of it. Tired of hearing the lies and the propaganda. You've been used. You've been used. 2 centuries ago, they penetrated every Christian church to seed this idea of Christian Zionism. They are wrestling God. And I tell you what, God's going to win. There were 10 nations in the land when the land was promised to Abraham's descendants. Abraham's descendants, the land was promised to. And who are Abraham's descendants? Well, Jesus tells you who Abraham's descendants are. He said to the Sanhedrin, who claimed that Abraham was their father, he said, if Abraham was your father, you would do the works of Abraham. But you seek to kill me. This Abraham did not do. Exactly. They show through their works that they're not descendants of Abraham. Descendants of Abraham, whether they are Jew or Gentile, have the faith of Abraham, and they do the works of Abraham. So when this land was promised to Abraham's descendants, there were 10 tribes in the land. You count them. Genesis 15, count them, 10 tribes. 10 tribes. These are the 10 kings in Revelation that give their power for 1 hour to the harlot that rides the beast. For 1 hour, they give their power. That's the Abraham Accords. They're wrestling God, the Abraham Accords. Here, I'm going to make peace for 1 hour. But this is not going to last. They turn on her and they burn her with fire. And I'm telling you, the fall is coming. Israel is going to face its Gethsemane, just like the Lord faced his Gethsemane. They're going to face their hour of turmoil and pain and suffering for what they've done. But God keeps covenant, because it's not about Israel's righteousness, because Israel is not righteous, but God is righteous. Israel does not keep covenant, but God keeps covenant. So he will keep his word. You want to watch my video, The Blind and the Deaf Witness, because that's what the prophet Isaiah calls Israel, a blind and a deaf witness, because they are blind and they are deaf. What good is a witness who can't see or hear anything? And that's the nation of Israel. They can't see and they can't hear, but God is going to do something miraculous with them. But your video on prophecy is completely wrong, because you don't know the history. You don't know the imperial history of Great Britain. You don't understand what they are trying to do. that we're shifting now from the beast kingdom, which is being ridden by the harlot. This last few centuries has been the beast kingdom, ridden by the harlot. It's been Anglo-Zionism. We're shifting away from Anglo-Zionism to the image of the beast. The beast is now breathing life into its image, and its image will speak, and its image will be AI, controlled by the technocrats, and they're all Jewish, and they'll be Israeli, and it'll be centered in Israel, and Chabad will back it up with Noahide laws, and persecution is coming for Christians, true Christians, not shills who suck up to Israel, true Christians who speak the truth. They will face persecution. So yes, I'm very disappointed. I'm going to leave a load of links. I could have made this a lot longer and refuted just about every point you made, but I'm just so tired of it. I'm tired of hearing the lies. I'm tired of hearing the propaganda from so-called Christians who should know better. And by the way, you think it's a great thing that they fooled Hezbollah with pages and injured nearly 3,000 people, including children, blew their fingers off and made them blind? I don't know what to say to people like you. I really don't. It's awful. Whatever way you look at it, it's awful. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Come on, boys, pay your respects. You have committed fornication with me and lived deliciously. I funded your wars and built your merchant system. You have all drunk of my wine. Come and find your rest in my bosom.